Right, everyone, thanks for coming. I guess we're at the last set of talks of the conference here, so I assume by now your brains are just about full. So I'm going to try to fill them up with just a little bit more. So I'm going to talk about color search today, a bit about how to build it and what you need to do it. So just to give you a quick intro, my name's Chris Becker, and I work in search engineering at Shutterstock. And to give you a quick intro about what is Shutterstock, Shutterstock basically sells stock photography. We also have other image types, such as illustrations and vector files, and part of the business also deals with videos and music. So this content is crowdsourced from artists around the world. On our end, we have a team that reviews them, and we index them for search. So then our customers come, buy a subscription, and download that content. So the core of our business is around licensing images. So why search by color? Why is this interesting? Why is this useful for us? So when people think about stock photography on the internet, this is often what comes to mind. We have everything from the slightly awkward to the totally ridiculous. So we have woman laughing by herself with salad. There are whole sites dedicated to that meme out there. We have the infamous business handshake, perfectly awkward and posed. We have our standard dog and a bunny outfit, pretty standard fare, and whatever's going on down there. So there's some masterpieces in the photographic arts here. But the reality is our collection also has a lot of really gorgeous content, much more interesting, more vibrant. And so we have a strong incentive to put this stuff in front of users, things like eggs, hills, and spices. So color is just one of many visual attributes that you can use to really create an engaging image search experience to kind of put those types of images in front of customers. And so in Shutterstock Labs, we have two tools that we built that really leverage color to create an interesting experience. And so I'll give you a quick demo of some of these here. One is called Spectrum, and clicking there did not actually launch it. So this is Spectrum, which you can't actually see here. Let's see if I do. Now you can see that, and it looks weird. Somewhere there's a mirroring option here. I'll just shrink that there. Slide that over there. Well, that kind of sucks. And I lost my window. Let's try, here's a preference in here for mirroring. There we go. All right, there we go. I've solved this technical problem here. Perfect. And that's the end of the talk. Thank you. So now my window shrunk a whole lot. But OK, so this is Spectrum, and it's basically a very simple interface. We get a keyword search box here and a slider, and we can basically use this slider to explore this collection by color here. Let's try to zoom out so you can actually see more than 4 results. So this is a really interesting way to just explore a concept. So we're searching for forest here, and so we have blue forests, we've got some purple forests, and so on. So we can explore some other concepts. So I'm going to search for Amsterdam. Sure. Yeah. All right, this talk has just been massively improved by this change. This is perfect. All right. Everything's working perfectly here. So back to this thing here. So I searched for Amsterdam, and we're going to explore Amsterdam by color here. So we got some tulips and stuff. We got some blue cityscapes. See, let's go over to the greens here. Oh, hello, there's Amsterdam. And then it's back to yellow tulips and clogs there. So that is one way to explore by color there. So the other app that I have to show you is called Palette. And this focuses on exploring by multiple colors. So when you come to this app here, you're given these discovery paths here, which were curated. And you can go in here and explore images that match these colors if the wireless works. Or if it doesn't work, I'll just, OK, perfect. So we can create our own palettes, explore our collection here. We can find an image and follow the palette from that image and do a search. We can also search for a keyword, and we get back palettes that really exemplify that concept here. So if I search for forest here, I get some lush green forests, brown and golden autumn forests, gray, foggy forests, and so on. This is another interesting way for customers to explore a library by color. And I'll move this back in the smoothest way possible. There. So those are the tools we have in Shutterstock Labs, and both of those are surprisingly powered by Solr. So if we want to build an app like this, it helps to have an understanding of some color data. So I'll give a very quick intro into some concepts there first. So if we're working in color search, it helps to understand color spaces. And a color space is basically just a coordinate system that we're mapping on top of the visible spectrum of color values. So everyone's familiar with RGB. Every single digital device uses it. HSL, which stands for hue, saturation, and lightness, is used in many graphical applications. Then we have things like lab color, which you may have heard of, and that's designed to represent more of the full range of human vision. And the LCH color space is basically a cylindrical representation of the lab color space. And both those graphics for lab and LCH are actually wrong because we can't actually display all the colors in them on a digital device here. And LCH should be a cylinder, not a circle. But color spaces are kind of interesting because they represent this area where physics and hard mathematics kind of intersect with biology and psychology. And just to get deep for a moment, I'm going to have a deep thought, just one. If you really think about it, color only exists in your mind. So the people around you could be experiencing color totally differently. And just by show of hands, how many people here are actually colorblind in any way? Just a few. I guess everybody else went to the other talk. They're like, screw color. So most of you are probably experiencing color the exact same way, forget that. But a few folks, the world is totally different. And so as if search wasn't hard enough, we all have these different experiences there. So when it comes to search applications, it really doesn't matter which color space you use. If you're just representing a color value that came out of an image, you can do that fine in any of these color spaces. It really matters most when you're computing the distance between two colors, and you want to have that represent the actual perceived difference between them. So if you're doing any sort of searching or ranking or grouping of colors, you want to be able to calculate those distances. And for the most part, you can do that in any color space using Euclidean distance, and that works reasonably well. It does break down into a few occurrences, such as in the HSL color space. If you're computing the difference between a gray value and a color value, it kind of breaks down because the hue component isn't defined for gray. But RGB does a much better job at that, and LCH and Lab also do pretty good. And if you really want to go nuts and get into some really sophisticated equations that better account for human vision and all the anomalies in different parts of the spectrum, there's some more equations in this Wikipedia article and color difference there, including one big beefy equation that's about this big on the page. Some nice meaty equation that really accounts for a lot of stuff. I won't go into that anymore today, though. So for building an image search system using visual data, the main thing to remember is that images are just numbers. And so anything that you can do on a set of numbers, you can do on an image. And that includes things like getting histograms, getting statistics such as median values, which represent like the average hue of an image or the average lightness. Or things like standard deviations and variance, which could be a proxy for like the contrast or the variability of colors in an image. Or other things like looking at how flat is your histogram or how peaked it is. So these things all can map to some sort of visual characteristic in the image. And if you know what numbers to search for, then you can actually find those images with search. So you get a lot of inspiration by just looking at the histograms that come out of certain styles of images. So if you look at the black and white image there, for instance, all of the values in the saturation bin there, right in the middle there, that histogram, are all in the 0 bucket there. So there's no saturation in that image. And lightness values are really skewed towards the dark end there. Now you can see in the image that's got lots of black and a few really small highlights there. So if we can search for histograms like that, then we can get images that have that style there. And we can do similar things for some of the other styles, like look for images that have one sort of monochrome color, like the one of the moss up there, or multiple primary colors, like the one of all the peppers. So now that we have an understanding of this color data, if we're going to build a search system with this, we need to get the data out of the images. That's kind of a crucial step to this stuff. So there's some tools and libraries that are pretty common that you can use for this. Image magic is the old school way that a lot of us have used. Works reasonably well. These days, the sexier and probably the faster way is to use the Python image library. And I'm not a Java guy, but I've heard that ImageJ is a good option to look into there. But here's a very quick example using Python. It's a very small amount of code that just gets color from an image. So we're just opening up our image, calling getColors, which you might be surprised to learn gets the colors from the image. And then we're basically just converting it over to hex values here, which are very convenient tokens to work in, since Solr operates very well on tokens. And so once we have this data from our images, the next step is to get this into Solr. So the simplest way to do this is just index colors like you'd index text. And for that, you can basically just take your histogram and represent the amount of each color by just repeating the token in your document. And that just takes advantage of all of Solr's default out-of-the-box capabilities. So if you're setting this up in Solr, you can use a very basic field type. The default Solr build has a text WS field type, which just indexes on, or just tokenizes on white space. You don't have to do any stemming or other analysis on it. And you can even just use Solr's default ranking effectively here. So you just say Q equals your colors, specify your field, et cetera, and you'll get some presentable results from that. If you want something more specific, you can also create your own sort functions by just accessing the color frequencies themselves, and that gives you some more control over the actual results. So as we said before, we can also look at statistics from the image, and we can also just put these in a Solr and search and sort on them. So things like your median lightness or hue, standard deviations, the largest bin in your histogram or how big that bin is, all these things can map to various visual attributes of these images. And again, if you're setting this up in Solr, you can set up a very simple field that's just an integer or a float. And one way to query this is to just sort between the distance between the input parameter and the median value in your image. And this is what we did for spectrum over here. We have our slider position, and we're basically sorting by the distance between that position and the values in each document in our index. And then just sorting by the closest match. So now I'll talk a bit about some of the concerns of ranking and relevance when it comes to color search versus, say, text search. And relevance, of course, is somewhat subjective, so I'll touch on some of the things that we found to be kind of critical and helpful for our users. So the most basic concept of relevance for color is just how much of the color is in the image. So if I have an image of a small plate and a big plate, I probably want the big plate to show up first. Very complicated concept there. Another issue is how close does the color match? So if I search for this bright shade of red up there and I get back this dark red image, that might not be the best match if I have a whole bunch of bright red images in my library. So color accuracy is pretty important. Another issue is if I search for this specific shade of green here, which of these images would be more relevant? Probably the one on the right over there, probably because it has more green. But the fact is, these two images might have the exact same amount of that specific shade of green there. So we have to look at all the colors that are visually similar to it in the image. Also, if I'm searching for multiple colors, like this shade of red and green there, would I expect this image to be my top ranked result? Probably expect an image that has, say, half red and half green in it. So the proportion of the actual colors matters too. So how do we account for these factors? I'll go over a few options that we tried out. So we're trying to rank by how much of the image has a certain color. We already covered this a bit with looking at term frequencies, just indexing them, and that's kind of your base relevance for a color search system. The question of color accuracy is linked closely to balancing precision and recall. So you don't want to index 30 million colors in Solr, because you don't need like 6,000 of the same shade of green there. You pretty much only need like 100 to 200 colors to create a decent experience. But if you reduce your color space too much and you end up with like an 8-color palette, then all you'll have is this one bright shade of red there. And when you search for that bright shade of red, you're gonna get back your dark red images, your light red images, your pink images, your orange images, and so on. That's probably not a good experience. If you don't reduce it at all, you search for a dark shade of red there, and you get back like 5 results with exactly that match, which also isn't terribly useful. So you want to find a good balance in there. When it comes to weighing multiple colors together, you probably want the image with the most even distribution of those colors to be ranked first. I don't usually see this too much as an issue with text search. Like, people aren't concerned that all the words in your query show up in exactly equal amount of times in your top document. There's one simple way you can do this. You can sort by just the product of all your term frequencies, and that kind of avoids some of the extra magic that Solr puts in, IDF and whatnot. If you want to go crazy, there's a more complex solution they can do, which involves computing the standard deviation or variance of the term frequencies of the matching colors, and then sort by results with the lowest variance. It's kind of a pain, though, because you have to build a whole equation for variance into your search query, but it's food for thought and probably an opportunity for further optimizations on this stuff. So when it comes to weighing similar and different colors in your image, you pretty much want the score for one color to kind of account for all the colors in the image. So if we have this histogram from an image, it has a lot of green, a lot of purple, red. We want to score that shade of green there that's selected based on the number of pixels of that shade of green, plus all the shades that are near it. And then we want to penalize that score based on the shades that are much different from that. And if we had an image that was only green, had some light green, some dark green, then we wouldn't have that orange there or that purple there. We just have greens getting boosted up and not penalized. And then that image would be assured to show up really high in rankings for green. So that brings us almost to the end of the talk. And I'll summarize just a few issues that we went over here. So if you're building color search in Solr, you want to be able to extract colors using a tool like the Python image library or ImageMagick. You want to basically score your colors based on the number of pixels. You want to adjust those scores based on similar and different colors in the images, and that's kind of where the color distance equations come in. You can index your colors into Solr as a text document. You can index the statistics as just integers and floats, and just add them to your queries or sort by distance on them too. And that's the end of the talk, but I do have one more demo to show you, which means 5 minutes of trying to get things to show up on this thing. Let's see if I've mastered this. Okay, so this is another app that we built, which has a slider here, and let's see if I can zoom out a little bit. So on one end of the slider, we have a search for cat over here. And on one end, we see some cat's eyes and black backgrounds. And then if I drag this slider over, the cats change. And at the end, we have these patterns here. This tool is basically sorting by image complexity and lets us explore a concept based on the intricacy of an image. And so the principle behind this is basically the same as all the color search stuff I just showed you, except that we have an extra layer of edge detection happening prior to indexing. So again, we're just doing edge detection and then just counting pixels in the edges here. And that just gives us a parameter that we can sort on here. So that gives us just another example of a way we can search visually using data inside image files. That's the end of the talk. Thanks, everyone. And I think we have some time for some questions. So the question was how we associate text with image, like cat or forest. And so in Shutterstock's library, we have the advantage that all the artists who are submitting to us all tag their images. So we kind of cheated there. I like to say we did something really complex to get that, but no.
Do you do anything to prevent background colors, like black or white, from dominating the palette in any way?
So the question was, do we do anything to prevent background colors? You mean the color search, or in this one specifically?
If you had a picture of something, a person, on a white background, it's going to show up as white, right? Because that's the dominant color. Are you guys just okay with that, or do you do something to actually pick up the colors in the content of the image?
Yes, so if we have a lot of white in an image, like a white background, we did do some tweaking and tuning of the algorithms here to kind of weigh those things down so they wouldn't all just take over the results. That can also help because in this app here, we actually have an option to just search isolated images. So that stuff can come in handy sometimes. Let's see. Sure.
One of the things that you did is you kind of collapsed multiple colors into the same color. So that it's done in index. I was wondering if I'm a user, I want to see actually, I want to choose how to find that I actually want to collapse these colors together. Is there a way you guys have ever think about doing that? At one time?
So the question was about whether we allow users to kind of fine tune how much we kind of narrow down colors versus just bucketing them all together. When we built this app, we tried to find a good balance somewhere so that we wouldn't have to go that deep. But if we see a use case like that, that is something that we want to explore too. And back there.
What?
So the question is, when will centrifuge be available? So this right now is just a private internal app. If it gets lots of buzz and lots of interest, then maybe there's a chance it'll get some more work on it. We'll record that. Yes. I'm sorry, what was that? Auto tagging? No, we don't have any auto tagging right now in this.
What about the size of the image? For example, if you have big image, you have more colors, right? So how do you?
Yeah, so the question was, if we have bigger images, we obviously have more pixels in there. To address that, we basically just normalize the sizes of the images before we send them into this whole processing pipeline. And another option is basically just index your colors as percentages of the whole image rather than actual absolute pixel counts. There.
Do you experiment at all sending the color part of the query as a geometric point rather than indexing colors?
So the question was, did we experiment with kind of the geometric and spatial search capabilities of Solr? In Spectrum, we tried that out a lot because on one hand, we wanted to be able to sort by the distance to a specific view, but then we also wanted some other stuff in there because we didn't want, I'll bring that up again here. We didn't want to put the slider on yellow and have just a whole page full of flat yellow images here. So we did add a few other parameters to try to get some variation and contrast and lighting in there. And that kind of worked, but we also wanted to include more than like 2 or 3 parameters. So we ended up finding ways to optimize that and collapse it down to one score that we could pre-compute and index. Let's see, yes. The error rate? The error rate in what context? All right, the, let's see, the question was about what sort of error rate we're trying to kind of get in the range of. Yeah, so we obviously have an algorithm that tries to identify if an image is isolated or not, and it's not totally perfect. The algorithm comes out with a score, a confidence score, so we basically just take the top scores from some threshold up and just say, okay, we're sure that these are isolated, and then we rank those up. So the ones that weren't as confident are buried down somewhere. Any more time? We got 5 minutes. So the question was about if we implement our own custom similarity scores. So yes, we are doing that for this. A lot of the color processing happens outside of Solr before we put in the index. And we're basically just indexing these histograms and some other weighted data. So a lot of that happens in sort of the indexing pipeline.
Where did the inspiration for this project come from?
So where did the inspiration for this come from? So actually the inspiration for Spectrum came from our head of product at the time, who used to be a DJ, and he came up with this idea that what if we could do for images what we could do with a mixer with music? And so one of the first prototypes for Spectrum was this thing that had like 25 sliders on it that one of our engineers built. And that was a little bit too crazy for customers, but eventually we got our user experience folks on it, and they whittled it down to like 3 sliders and then 1 slider, and that's basically what we put up here. The mic's coming.
How do you identify the simplicity or intricacy of an image?
The simplicity or intricacy?
Yeah.
So how do we do that for this? So when you run an image through edge detection, I can actually give you a quick example using the nifty internet. Edge detection. You basically get an image that looks kind of like this here. So it's just this black image with a bunch of white outlines where the edges are. And so if we basically run that image through this histogram code, you basically have some number of black pixels and some number of white pixels. And the more edges you have, the more white pixels you're going to have. So that's a metric that you can basically just sort on and find images with more edges or fewer edges. We just index the final score that comes out of that, not the raw data in there. Yes. The size of the Solr index. If I remember, somewhere in the range of dozens of gigs. I don't remember the exact number. Back when we first built this, it had like half the number of images at the time. I haven't looked at it in a while.
So earlier you were talking about how all your users tag your content, your pictures, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you do anything to limit that? Like, what if I put every word in the dictionary on my image so it'll show up for all searches?
So the question is basically, do our users spam the keywords in our images here? We try to do some things to limit that, like they can only add 50 keywords, no more than that, so they better include the right keywords or they're going to be kind of sad. And we also augment all our rankings with data from our searches and users that tell us which keywords are more relevant for an image. Yes?
For example, if you have a white kitchen with red cabinets, how do you handle that? In certain queries for red kitchen.
So the question was about whether we group keywords to kind of get an idea of like which color applies to which object, right? So we get our keywords basically just a big bag of words right now, which isn't terribly helpful, but that's what we have to work with. So we don't get a chance to do a lot of that stuff. Sure. Hey, what was that? We might need a mic over here. Austin? What was that? Sorry. Oh, if you have like Austin, Texas, and Austin somewhere else, then usually the more popular one just wins. And tough luck for the other folks. Apple. So there you go. There's also certain restrictions, like we're not legally allowed to like sell pictures of Apple products and stuff. And apparently wireless went down too.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you use any special purpose GPUs for doing image processing and getting the pixel contents from there?
So the question is about if we're using special GPUs for this. Right now, we're not. It is an area of research that we're very interested in. And we're out of time. So thanks, everyone, for coming.